Welcome to the Niche Pursuits podcast. Today we are joined by Ann Moss. Ann and her husband run a portfolio of websites. She has 25 websites in her portfolio in total, and the websites generate around $200,000 per month in revenue. So obviously she's achieved some wonderful numbers, and she is kind enough to come on board and share with us some of the details behind how she has built this portfolio of websites. For starters, we talk about content production. She is producing around 1,000 articles per month across her team of roughly 50 people. So clearly, there's a lot of operational scale behind this endeavor, and she's got a lot of insights to share on how to create operations that can allow that many articles to go live each month with a standard and a high quality. We dive into niche selection. She and her husband have started all 25 sites on their own, so they haven't bought any of these. So clearly, she has a lot of area of expertise in areas on the internet and how to pick a good niche. She shares what her 4 criteria are for a niche that she would go into, and then how to evaluate some of these individual criteria, these individual specifications. We talk about keyword research. Some of her websites have 3,000 and 4,000 articles on them at this point. And so clearly, she's done a lot of keyword research. We talk about going after long tail queries that are low in competition, how that's getting harder, but how to kind of circumnavigate that difficulty. We do spend some time talking about content updates and link building, and I think you might be surprised at some of the things that she shares when it comes to both of these topics. And we do touch on RPMs. Most of her revenue comes from ad revenue. And so she has a lot of thoughts about how to maximize the RPMs, which is the revenue per page view, basically, when you get down to per 1,000 page views. She's got a lot of thoughts there. So again, I've said this before when we interview people who have large sites, that even if you're someone who might only have one site or is just thinking about getting started, all the way up to other large portfolio site owners, there's something here to take for every single person. There's, at the end of the day, large or small, these are the tactics that really successful people are using to grow and monetize websites. So get out your pen and paper. I hope you enjoy. All right, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman, and today we are joined by Ann Moss. Ann, welcome on board.
Hi, Jared. Thank you for having me here.
I'm really excited about this one. I have to say, this is a topic that I love that we're talking about. I mean, obviously, we're talking about building websites, but you and your husband have a team that has really mastered the scale of building websites. And so I'm just so excited for all the different things we get to dive into today. Why don't you bring us up to speed? You have a fun little journey to where you've gotten so far, and maybe catch us up on that.
Okay. So maybe I'll start with where we are right now, because it's kind of, I don't want to say it's the end point because we're still growing, but right now we have a company with a portfolio of 25 websites. And we have a team of over 50 people who help us full time, and that's everything: writers, editors, VAs, graphic designers, everyone pretty much. We also work with freelance writers in addition to that, and we currently produce just over 1,000 posts each month. And definitely has been a long journey to get to this point. So I'll start with my origin story. It's
1,000 posts per month. I'm just laughing because the scale in my head is so big. So
it is big. It's big in my head too. I'm still getting used to it. It's new. So I basically started out in 1998, a very long time ago. I'm originally from Israel. And I was in the IDF back then, an officer in the IDF. And they started with this thing called the internet back in the 90s.
Right. So that would put it around then, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And I taught myself to code in HTML. It was kind of fun, just to see how you can make your screen respond to all kinds of instructions and fonts and colors and stuff. And the internet was brand new. I mean, there just weren't enough websites out there to cover all kinds of topics. And I decided I want to, try this out. So I created a couple of websites in Hebrew. And they turned out, I think, quite nice. And mostly there was just zero competition, just nobody
Yeah.
else out there. So
That
every
is
new
truly the definition of no competition at that point.
yeah. So everything was brand new and got a lot of media attention. So I got interviewed like by the national radio and newspapers and everyone just because it was so new. And like a couple of years later, we figured, this is working out so nice in Hebrew, and there's such a huge market out there in English. So why not try and switch over to that? And at that point, I left the army, and we decided to open. We is myself and my husband. Said, let's try this out. And we started our first website in English. And at first, I basically hired translators to just translate what I had in Hebrew into English. And it took me a while to get more comfortable with the language and just start writing on my own. And it basically grew from there. And what we started was a forum site. So we started a forum site in English, and it kept growing over the years. And around that time, I also had my kids. So that sort of slows you down a little bit. At least it did in my case.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So a couple of kids, and we decided to homeschool as well. So basically at that point, I sort of went into this lull and just, backed out of working. And fortunately, around 2011, I was approached by a US company that suggested to just go into a partnership with us on the forum side. They took over pretty much everything, the platform, the monetization, everything else. And we continued making money from the side, but I didn't have to do a whole lot of work to get there. So it worked out really well. And move forward to 2016. They backed out. They changed their strategy, and we had to go back to managing our site full time. And it coincided, with the kids growing and everything. So that was a good timing for me as well. And at that time, header bidding started, and RPM rates shot up because back, I don't know how many people here, listeners would know much about RPM 10 or 15 years ago. But back then we were making like $1 to $3 for every 1,000 views. That was the price. It was like I had a site that had 3 million page views at one point, but it wasn't making that much money.
Oh, yeah.
So once the RPM rates began to go up, we decided that this is a good time for us to expand. So at that time, I knew that you can make money online, right? It wasn't like some vague notion. I was making money online. That was how I was making a living. But we could suddenly see that there is a whole lot more potential to that. And so at 2018, I decided to go into niche sites in addition to the forum site. And that's when I started creating my current portfolio. So 6 sites to begin with and growing from there.
Why don't you let us know where you're at right now in terms of the scope and maybe, revenue numbers or whatever you're comfortable sharing. And then we'll start diving into the process of how you got there, because there's a lot that's happened since that 2016, 2017 period where you started 6 sites.
Yeah, definitely a lot. So right now we trying to cross the $200,000 per month revenue point. Almost there. So 190 something for the last couple of months.
If I just waited one more month to interview you, we probably could have been at the 200 number.
hopefully, fingers crossed. Yeah, that'll be the figure for August. But July RPM was low, so we were hoping to do this in July, but it's going to hopefully happen in August. But pretty close to that. So that's where we are now. And that's from around almost 5 million monthly page views.
Okay. So a decent number of page views.
Yeah.
How many sites make up the portfolio at this point with the 5 million page views?
So it's 25 websites right now. The number keeps changing because we've been adding more sites over the last year or so. I see I have a squirrel there in the background.
I noticed that. I noticed that. That's a squirrel with a good bushy tail and a good climbing
Yeah.
endeavor on him.
Yeah, we live in a forest here, so all kinds of critters come by my window, which is kind of nice. So 25 websites, but not all of them are large. We have 5 websites that bring in like 80% of the revenue and maybe 70% of the revenue. And then the rest goes, divided between the other sites.
On paper, it looks like kind of that classic 80-20. 80% of the revenue comes from like 20% or so of your sites, and then the rest make up the bulk of the portfolio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they're also much smaller. So the big sites are really big. Like we have sites with 3,000 or 4,000 posts per site. And that just, the sheer size is what generates all of that traffic.
Is most of your revenue split on the the ad revenue side? You mentioned RPMs. That's what I was thinking. Is most of your revenue coming from ad generated revenue, or are you also in affiliate spaces or other types of revenue opportunities?
So I would 90 to 95%, depending on the month, comes from display ads, and then the rest is just Amazon affiliates.
Okay. So very heavily invested in producing content that generates ad revenue. And you talked about how obviously 10 years ago, it was just AdSense, I think, right? There was no real other way to put an ad on your site, or maybe there were, but they didn't pay very well either. But then now fast forward to today, what kind of RPMs do you see? It's hard to say because you have 25 sites, but do you have an expectation or an average RPM that you see across the board?
It really depends on the niche, and we work both with Mediavine and AdThrive, so we have sites with both. And anything between 25 and 65.
Okay.
And again, it depends on the month and, season, things like that. But on a good month, like June was a good month. So June, we saw like an average of 67 on one of our sites.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's very high, obviously. I think anybody would be happy with that. Well, I want to talk a bit about, it's just so rare for us to have someone who's managing so much successfully like you on this podcast. I guess I want to spend a few minutes. And for those people who are listening, maybe who are thinking, well, I don't manage 25 sites. I don't even manage 5 sites. I want to talk to you about some tactics, because obviously you have a lot of knowledge that we could learn from managing and seeing so much. But before we get into that, can you talk about how you got from your first site to 6 sites to 25 sites? Did you start most of them yourself? Is there a process behind it? Did you acquire most of these? When you acquired, were they big or small? I'm just curious how you go from 1 to 6 to 25 and maybe what the steps looked like for you guys.
So we haven't bought any of these sites. We created all of them. And I am I think it's just my mindset. I tend to focus on, it's easier for me to focus on strategy and big pictures and big processes rather than, specific projects. I used to compare that. I used to play StarCraft back in, I don't know if people still play that, but
I remember playing that.
Yeah. So my strat, so it's for those who don't know the game, it's a real-time strategy game where you build your bases, create your resources, and then fight your opponents. And my strategy was always to create multiple bases. So I would just go and start one, and then start another one, then start a third. I would completely ignore any kind of skirmishes or attacks going on in the background, and just stay very focused on growing my resources. And that's how I would usually win, because people tend, I think it's the same with websites. So many people tend to like focus on the small stuff and like spend a very long while on optimization, on, I don't know, internal link building, on all kinds of stuff that I'm not sure it really, I just ignore all of that and look at the bigger picture and just keep on creating content and creating websites. So that's basically how I got from 1 to 6 to 25, is just deciding that this is where we're going. And once I made a decision, it's just a question of, putting the wheels in motion and just making it happen. When I started with the 6 sites, I used to do the whole process. But I had a process now, right? So I had like, okay, choose a domain name, choose a niche, choose a domain name, and then have, a list of steps to install the site, install the plugins, tweak stuff, prepare the content plan. Everything was very structured. So it was just a matter of just following the plan step by step, and then you just reach the destination and ignoring everything else on the way. So not, some people, I think it's easy to do, to get like sucked into what logo would I have? What domain name should I choose? And then people spend weeks on deciding on that perfect domain name or perfect logo or whatever. And I'm just not doing that. I just, okay, I have 2 hours to come up with 5 domain names. So that's what I'm doing. And I don't care if they're not perfect. They need to be good enough. I know what my criteria, everything that meets my criteria, that's good enough, move on. It doesn't really matter that much. You don't have to have the perfect domain name. It just needs to be good enough. And the same with the site design, with templates, all of that. I just tend to go through that very fast. And so, and we do have a business plan. And we have like a plan. We created that one. I guess I sort of skipped a step before when I described what really made us grow was COVID. So when COVID started, my husband, went into lockdowns and all of that, and he couldn't go to his work. So we said, okay, maybe this is what we needed now that you're available. And he specializes in operation research, and he's a numbers guy. And I said, maybe we can bring you on now full time, because he used to help me before that, but now he had all this time, free time. So I said, okay, maybe we can go big with this. So he sat down and he created these very detailed and very sophisticated spreadsheets where he outlined the future of the business, depending on our investment, the number of posts that we were to create. So we had all of these, assumptions, like a post would cost this much to make and it would make that much, and so on. And he put in all of the numbers and did his magic and came up with these projections, that we would make this amount of money 2 years from now if we were to invest this amount now and this number of posts. And we just work with that. Once you have that plan in place and we decided what we were comfortable with in terms of the investment, once you have that in place, you just go with it. Just follow the steps.
Well, yeah, it's one thing to have a plan, but it's another thing to execute it at the level you've done. I think creating a plan like that is complicated. Executing it the way you have is probably even, I don't know, I would say probably even more complicated, because to manage, say, like you said earlier, 1,000 posts a month and 25 sites and that sort of thing, that's a lot. That's a lot. Well, that's great. I mean, that does make sense. And I love that we have a StarCraft reference for probably the first time in website podcast history. But it does make sense. It really does make sense. Yeah. And I mean, maybe let me ask you a more detailed question, more tactical question. How do you've picked 25 niches now? You've done research and you've kind of picked 25 different niches. You haven't bought any of those websites. You started them all from scratch. What do you look for when it comes to a niche? And I'm guessing, because your model is ad heavy, that certainly probably has a bit of an influence on what you pick. But what are some of the criteria you have when going into your next website?
Mm-hmm. So I look at several things. First thing that I want to see is that there is enough traffic in the niche. So it's always a question how big of a niche I want to target. I think there are pros and cons to going with a small niche or versus a big one. I move between the two. Like sometimes I'm saying, okay, let's go with a bigger one and get a domain that can cover 5,000 posts or 10,000 posts in the future, sometime in the future, have that, domain that has that potential to grow to that size. Other times I'm thinking maybe we want to go like with a micro niche, maybe it's going to be just 500 posts. That's the limit. That's how much, you can go with this topic. But either way, whatever I'm planning, I want to make sure that there is enough traffic out there, that people are searching, that the search volume is out there. That's the first consideration. The second thing, obviously, is the competition. And so before I commit to a niche, I begin by creating a content plan, even before I buy the domain or anything like that. And I actually sit down and do the topic research and see if I can come up with at least 50 topics that I think will generate at least a few hundred page views each month. on average, obviously you can never tell for sure, right, for a specific post, but like on average in terms of both the search volume out there and the competition. So I want to find those where I think there is still enough traffic out there that is like super low competition, preferably zero competition, as in no one has targeted this specific query before. And then if I can find these 50 and it's easy for me to find them, like I can find them within 2 to 3 hours, then that, we can move with this one, with this niche. If I'm struggling, if I'm sitting there like for 2 hours and I just barely manage to find 10 to 15, then I'll probably skip the niche and try and find something else. And then I also look at things like, how can we monetize? And we monetize using display ads, right? So it's like, who cares? We can always put ads on the site. But I am trying to assess the RPM by seeing how the niche as a whole is monetized. So if they have like lots of products and people buy a lot of things, like take the pet niche, for example. So I know that people who have a dog, I'm not in the dog niche, so I feel very comfortable giving it as an example. So there you go. So I know that people buy lots of stuff for their dogs, right? And they pay super high vet bills and all of that. So I know that the expense is out there. And once people spend money, then advertisers will spend the dollars to get to these people. So I know that there is, there will be campaigns targeting the dog people. Sometimes it's not even a direct question of the topic of the site. Sometimes it's just, if you go for luxury travel, then I would assume that the audience with a luxury travel website will probably have money to buy luxury cars or, just buy very high-end products. And therefore, they're the kind of demographic that campaigns in general would like to target. So that's another consideration. That's basically the third one. And then there's a very small consideration of how easy is it to create a content for the niche. Some niches, it's like super easy because it's very easy to find writers. Dogs, for example, everybody loves dogs, right? Yeah. So it's very easy to find writers who will be very happy to write about anything dog related. Whereas if you were to go and write about, finance or something that, at least to me, is boring. I don't know, some people I guess there's always someone who will find anything interesting, but...
Your husband sounds like he might be interested in that topic.
You know what? Even he does it. He deals with it, but he doesn't love it, right? It's very... Yeah. So that will be a niche where it's be much more difficult to find people. Also, the level of expertise needed to even just begin to write the answer. So if it's, how to brush your dog or something like that, it's not that difficult. You write you read a few articles, you watch a couple of YouTube videos, you can write about it. That's the level of expertise needed. Whereas it's about finance, then, you better know something about that in advance. It's not that easy to do the research if you know nothing about it. So 4 considerations four things that I take into consideration. That's search volume, competition, how easy it is to write about the niche, and what was the 4th one? I didn't mention it right now.
The RPM potential or the revenue potential on the...
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I was going to sum up the same way. I was going to say, so it sounds like you make it sound very easy, but there's actually quite a few influencers to what goes into this. And you're kind of looking almost for the needle in the haystack. You're trying to find something that's a collection of low competition, underserved, or actually you said not served at all, in a space that people spend money in, but that it's easy to find writers when, and you don't have to pay an arm and a leg to get those writers.
Right. Yeah. And
simple.
Once you have it, set up like this, it's very easy. The criteria, they're there. So I can just go and say it. Now, nothing is perfect, right? Like you said, finding that would be like the perfect niche, but I'm okay with just getting 3 out of 4 sometimes, or I'm saying, okay, maybe, I'm not sure about the search volume, but it is low competition. I think the RPM potential is high, and I should be able to find people who would love to write about this. So, let's give it a try. We'll see. And not all of our sites succeed. That's okay as well. I think it's part of
going down that road, maybe, you find a topic that's never been addressed in finance, and finance, generally speaking, maybe is a high paying RPM, and it's an area where you have resources that you can tap into for writers, but it's going to cost a lot to produce the content, but maybe it's still worth it because you got three out of those four or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let me ask you, why don't you have a site in the dog niche?
Because I found pets in general, dogs specifically, is super saturated. And I know why, because all of the courses on how to build niche websites tell people to go for something that they love. Start your first site, you have to write it yourself. So write about something you love, and everybody loves dogs and fishing. So these two, so like, and they all use the same, long tail keyword research methods. So you end up with having everything just fully covered, every possible angle. So I just stay out of these.
So people spend a lot of money on dogs, but it's just too darn saturated. Okay, fair enough. I had to ask. Let me ask about maybe the content system you have. And I think there's something for all of us to learn here. I have a couple websites myself. A lot of people listening are on their first website, or maybe have a couple as well. You have 25. I'm guessing you don't read all 1,000 articles that your team publishes every month. How have you created systems? Maybe you can give us some high level tips around a content process, whether it ranges from keyword research to article brief, to writing, to editing, to publishing. How do you ensure that the content matches? I'm guessing you're going to say SOPs, but even at that level, like, how do you kind of manage the SOPs and make sure they're being done properly?
Right. So first, it's always a challenge, and we try to keep improving. I can't say that we've perfected a system, but we keep improving. So we have an organization right now. 50 full-time people. That's they have to be organized in some kind of structure, and we have that. We have what we call divisions within the company. And like, there are people in the company right now where there are two levels of managers between me and them. So it's like it's structured. Otherwise, this thing couldn't, it just couldn't work. So we have writing teams basically, and then there are team leaders, and they manage the writers directly, and then we have someone who manages those team leaders, and then she works with me directly with weekly reports and calls and everything. So that's the level that where I get involved. So if there is like issues, she would, they escalate up all the way to me, but most of everything is done without my involvement. And we have this similar setup for what we call publication, which is basically a team of graphic designers / VAs, and they're the ones who take the written content. They take these articles, they add the images, stock photos, optimize images, whatever is needed, and then publish and move on. So it's like this conveyor belt, this factory that we have, and everything we use ClickUp. But I think, there's Monday, there's Asana, there's all kinds of software that lets you do the same thing. But for us, ClickUp works very well. And we have a workflow, and that's anchored into ClickUp. So every article is a ClickUp task, and it has this process that it goes through. So it gets created, right? And then there's a template with the task description, with what it is that we want from the writers. We don't create specific outlines for each article. Mostly, sometimes we have like special items of content where I say, I really want to go big with this one. This is going to be a major post. But 99% of the times we don't deal with that. We just tell the writer, this is the title. We train the writers. So we have, they go through a training period. And then we teach them how to create their own outline, so they know how to do that. And then it goes from the writer to the editor, from the editor into what we call logging, which is basically where they get paid. So it gets into their payment spreadsheets, and then it moves on to adding media, publication, and it goes out. There is always we have the editors, so there's writer and editor, so at least two people reading the text, and then the
Right.
people, the team leaders, the team leaders can edit, but they don't necessarily edit themselves. So that there are editors that they work with, but they do spot check everything. So they like randomly check a certain percentage of each writer's work after editing to make sure that it, follows the guidelines that we provide. And then the people above them, like their manager, spot checks after them, and then makes sure that. And I sometimes spot check stuff, and I go back and say, hey, I think this could have been done a little bit differently. And we have a lot of discussions around that. We have meetings, we have editors meetings and calls, and the team leaders meet with the writers, and like there's a lot of ongoing discussion within the company about how to write stuff. And like sometimes people will come up with questions even about things like grammar or how to. So we encourage that kind of discussion and that kind of I guess mutual, growth, and so that's one way how we get better. I hope at creating content, but it's a system. There's a workflow. It all goes through step by step, and I'm try to at least just do strategy and not really deal with all the nitty-gritty of the production process.
Well, that was kind of my next question. I mean, you have a conveyor belt system set up basically for all your content. You're producing so much of it. And that's a very systematized approach to something that can, I don't want to say be templated, but can be systematized out. What about I'll call it the intangible side of building websites where, it's been 3 months for this site and some content's been published, and someone needs to go in and kind of look at the site and figure out the direction going forward, or it's been a year, or a site drops a little bit in revenue and someone needs to go in and kind of understand what needs to happen to get it back on track, or all these intangible things that come up along the way that maybe it's harder to systematize, or maybe you do have systems for that and people for that. I'm curious.
So that's me. that's the part. That's where I get involved. So I consider that to be strategy. That goes beyond the ongoing production. And I check stats every day. I like it. I enjoy it, but I think it's also a good way to sort of catch issues. Like sometimes there can be a problem with the website, and that's the way for me to see it right away. If I were to wait a week, we could easily lose $10,000 just because I didn't catch that soon enough. So I do that every day. And my husband and I together, we have a once a month evaluation of all of the portfolio. So we go over the stats for the previous month and see where we're going and how the site is doing. We try, our main metric is dollar per post. So how many dollars per post does the site make overall? It can be from traffic, can be from RPM. So sometimes there may be, like a drop in one of the parameters. It can be just the RPM or just the traffic. We don't know, but then we start looking into that to see what happened, and that's where. So they're constantly monitored, the sites.
That sounds like a lot. I mean, obviously you're doing it well, and it's clear you have a mind for it. It sounds like a lot to try to keep track of a lot of plates to spin, or whatever acronym or analogy you want to use there. And I'm fascinated by that. It sounds like, but you guys have a good system in place, so it sounds like that's something that
and a lot of that is automated. So like checking the stats, I don't have to go into Google Analytics and just start, using the drop down menu and see each site separately. We have a spreadsheet that my husband created where that just automatically goes to Google Analytics and grabs everything from there and just displays it in one single chart. So I get an overview of the entire portfolio day by day, seeing if things are going up or down, and then I can just go and see. And because, like I said, it's just a bunch of sites that are the largest sites. So if I'm seeing the traffic going up or down, these are the primary suspects, and that's where I would go and check to see what happened. And then if I need to, I can also dig into the smaller sites. It is a challenge, though. I'm sure that, the smaller sites, they could potentially benefit from having someone, take a deeper look, a closer look. But, like you said, it's the 80-20 rule. So we focus on the big ones and then see what happens with the rest.
Yeah. And the reason I asked is I think I've interviewed someone here before who had a larger portfolio, and they would assign like a manager to 5 sites, say. I'm not quoting them directly. I can't remember exactly what they do, but basically there's like a SEO manager or whatever they call them that kind of manages that part that you're talking about for maybe a collection of 5 sites in the portfolio, or a certain number of page views, and they divvy the sites out accordingly. So, there's a couple different ways to kind of crack that nut, I guess.
Yeah.
How big, you mentioned this automations that you have from Google Analytics to a spreadsheet. It brings up a larger question. How much do automations play a role in allowing you guys to handle scale at this size? Do you have a lot of, obviously you have a lot of systems, but outside of the systems that people follow, do you have many automations set up or anything like that?
Yeah, sure. ClickUp lends itself very well to automation. So we use that, we make use of that. Anything from as soon as the writer would move the post into editing, so things happen, like there's the due date changes automatically, or notifications go out and all of that. So we have automations, even just bringing in the topics from the spreadsheet where you have the content plan into ClickUp. So automatically ClickUp takes those and adds the template and all of that. So there's a lot that can just be done. It's automated, and ClickUp does that quite well.
I want to maybe switch gears a bit and take a step back and imagine that we're sitting here. You do this every day, looking over your 25 sites, and with how many page views did you say a month? Is it 5 million page views a month?
Yeah.
5 million. Okay, so you kind of have this vision of websites right now that's maybe a little larger than the rest of us get to see, and we get to see what's working, what's not working across 100,000 page views or across 20,000 page views, and you get to see it across 5 million page views a month. What are some things that you're seeing in 2022 that are working well that you could share, like some pretty high level findings that you get to see with that?
So first of all, I also have the time perspective, because I have we haven't always been at 5 million, but I have like 2 to 3 years where it's been growing. So I've seen things change. So I'd say I think we generally apply the long tail approach. So that's typically the kind of content that we try to the kind of traffic that we try to target. I think that's getting more difficult as time goes by. Lots of people, I think it's a great industry in the sense that you don't need a lot of capital, to start out. Anyone can start a website basically, right? And the right way to start a brand new website is go after these long tail queries. So it just gets, like I said, just like with the dog niche, so it happens in other niches as well. People just, and I think even more than before, since the I'd say October, November updates, Google updates last year, and they hit affiliate sites really, really hard. And then you get, well, that's my theory. I don't know if it's right, but that's how I imagine it. You got this bunch of affiliate, publishers who specialize in affiliate content, and they have their own content machines, and they work large scale. And now they got hit with this algorithm update, and so they have this machine that they need to use, and they know that people are making okay money with display ads, and they sort of shifted from affiliate to display ads, and it just became far more crowded. So I can see that the end result is just, when I work on getting topics, it just takes much longer to find the ones that are underserved. Pretty much all kinds of very weird long tail queries already been covered. I'm not saying that there are no long tail queries. In the industry, there's still a lot of gaps that you can fill in, but it's just becoming more, it's more saturated compared to like a year ago. Wow, so so that's one thing. I think I know a lot of people, speaking of affiliate content, a lot of people were hit because their sites had a lot of lists, like best X for Y kind of lists, and they were hit the hardest. But in my experience, this kind of topic, this kind of content can still work. within a site, I would say like 95% of our content is purely informational. But then we do go after these queries as well, affiliate, and we monetize just using Amazon, no other affiliate program, but it can still work. So it's not dead. It's just, in my view, my experience, it's just a question of the balance. If you take a strong informational website and then occasionally you run with a list kind of affiliate kind of content, that's okay so far for us.
It's interesting to hear you talk about the competition increasing. I mean, I guess it's a two-part question. Are you using, certain tools that you could talk about to find these keywords? And then do you think that as tools have gotten so much better in the last couple of years at finding these longer tail, low competition keywords, that's part of the reason? But I guess it's a two-part question for you.
I think the tools definitely have something to do with it, and at least in the sense that everybody seems to be going after the same kind of batch of keywords. So we use everything. We use Ahrefs, and I keep trying new tools. Low Fruits, I think it's a good tool. So I have a lot of respect and appreciation for the tools. In the end of the day, I think for me, deciding, making that decision whether a topic should be included in the content plan or not, I don't base that just off these tools because they can be extremely misleading. For example, a lot of people think it's like a very simple game. It's the search volume versus the keyword difficulty. And I think it's a very risky approach because what people sometimes, they forget that the keyword difficulty is a very simple metric. It just shows you the domain authority of the top 10 results on the first page, something like that. And that is not necessarily a good indication of how much competition there is out there. So you have to actually go and look at the search results. It could be that you have, lots of very strong, high authority sites there, and they're not targeting the query at all. So
it would show as a very difficult keyword when in fact, no one's ever produced anything. And so it's actually very easy. If you just wrote the topic and you are topically relevant for the general topic, you could outrank and then rank for a very difficult keyword, basically.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And those are the keywords that people are missing out on because
because they're not, the tools aren't rendering them.
Yeah. Also, on the other hand, you can see like keyword difficulty 0 or 1 or 5 or whatever it is, the low numbers, and you go in and you see like the top 20 results are spot on addressing the search intent, head on. There's just no way. I mean, you could try, but it doesn't mean that it's an easy keyword. Also, I've noticed recently, and that's, I think, even more so since the very last update in June, that the domain authority is no longer, it's not like let's say you have several websites going after the same queries, same search intent, and then you have it used to be that the higher the domain authority, the higher they rank. And that has changed. I'm seeing so many times, the low DR coming above the high one. I'm not sure why. And, I think the algorithm is basically just so complex. I have a feeling that even if you were to ask Google engineers, they wouldn't know why.
I agree with you, by the way. No one person knows all of the secrets or how it all comes together.
So I think in the end, I just think
go ahead.
In the end, a lot of it is intuition and experience. And I think that's maybe where I have somewhat of a benefit, just having created over 15,000 topics to date. That's the number of published articles. So I know, I keep looking to see what happens with them, right? I'm looking at our stats to see what worked out, what worked and what didn't. So I have this kind of intuition sometimes, and I'm saying, okay, I think this is a good topic. I think this one isn't. I can't even tell you exactly why. Now, am I always right? No. So a lot of our content fails. And that's, that's sort of, for me, that's built into the game. It's just part of how it is. And that's okay.
I was going to ask you about the keyword research that you do. And you kind of started talking about how you go look at the SERPs and look at the results and kind of analyze in depth on that level. Let me ask you about how you construct content for a site. There's so many different ways to do it, right? And especially when you're going after long tail keywords, it's very common to get these search terms that you could have to pick whether to write the article about it or include it in an article that's maybe a little bit larger of a topic, right? So, we're talking about dogs, and maybe it's a larger topic about if dogs overheat when they what the temperature is when they overheat when they walk, and then you get the specific dog breed, and does this dog overheat when it walks, or things like that. How do you determine whether to write an article on its own for like a longer tail query, informational, or if to try to put a couple of those together into one topic that you write about?
So that's an excellent question, and I wish I had an excellent answer. I don't. I sometimes guess, and what I try to do is see the search results. What is out there, and try to figure out what Google thinks is the search intent here, and how like breed specific it may be. So the breed question, it's an excellent example, because I would say, if it's a question where the breed of the dog is relevant, I mean, it's like what to feed your Chihuahua would probably be a different answer from what to feed your Great Dane or your, I don't know, I'm not an expert on dog breeds, but I'm sure different dog breeds probably have different nutritional needs based on size or level of activity and such. So I would think that with that kind of question, you have to be breed specific with the answer. And Google would know that because people would search like that. However, I can see how with other questions, maybe it doesn't matter what breed your dog is. It's the same. It doesn't matter like how to, and I don't understand. I don't know that much about dogs, so I could be wrong here. But it may be that, like, I don't know, dog eye care, or vision, healthcare issues with specific ones. Maybe it's the same across all breeds. Maybe, I don't know, how to trim your dog nails. Maybe it's the same, and it doesn't really matter the size of the dog or the breed. And in that case, it really wouldn't matter in the search results. And it's ultimately down to the user. So if people think the breed matters, then it matters. It's not like, maybe a vet would say, hey, it doesn't really matter, but people think it matters. So it matters to them. So then you need to go, to go to the long tail version and try the specific question that people ask. And sometimes it doesn't matter. So you can use a little bit of common sense here to try and figure out when it's time to, cluster these variations of the question into one big article, and when it's best to really go with different articles. But there isn't an easy answer to this one. I think it's really a case by case.
Yeah. I asked Michael Donovan, we had him on a couple months ago, the same question. His analogy had to do with, he was talking about repairing cars as his example. It wasn't his site, but, and we were kind of deep diving that topic of like, how do you jumpstart a Ford F-150? And then do you write the article for how do you jumpstart a 2013 Ford F-150? Or do you just leave it at the Ford F-150? Or do you just write how to jumpstart a car? And so we were kind of, reminds me of that. It's a tough one. It's really a tough one. So, and you're right. It's probably, and I would assume that from your 100, from your 15,000 posts that you have now, that you probably, the it depends answer works really well for that. I have so many more questions for you. I realize we're getting towards the end, so I'm going to try to prioritize my questions here. You mentioned earlier, and I read a blog post that you wrote a while back about RPMs and about how you approach getting higher RPMs, because you talked about how you routinely get $50, $60+ RPMs. Can you share some of those things that you see or that you've seen work to get higher RPMs for people who are listening?
Yes. So there are some things you can do to optimize and increase RPM. I think it might change based on your niche and the type of site. So I think with a good kind of publishing, advertising platform, it's always a good idea to reach out to your rep and try and see if they can help you, if they have any ideas. Because what I like about AdThrive and Mediavine is that they have the expertise and they're good with managing that end of things. So I don't usually do a lot when it comes to optimizing revenue. However, there are like small things that maybe they missed and you can notice. So it's just Make sure that you have the adhesive units in the first of all, have a sidebar. That's that's a good starting point, because in the sidebar you can place more ads, and then you can have the adhesive unit there at the bottom of the sticky ad there, bottom of the sidebar, and have it on the bottom of the site as well. And I switch on pretty much, almost everything that they offer. So it could be video ads, and it could be the interstitials, and there's just all kinds of features there. And I just make sure that we just use everything that we can to monetize. I would hope that they don't let you just go crazy. You would never see a Mediavine site or an AdThrive site just, that you can't browse because there are too many ads all over the place. So they sort of keep the balance there for you. It's also the question, it's not a question of the more ads you can squeeze in on the page, the higher the RPM, because in the end, there is a diminishing, return on the number of ads, because it's the same user looking at them. So, and it's a bidding war, right? So that they would bid highest on the first ads, and then if your user is on the page and keeps scrolling and seeing the 20th ad, then they just, this is the lower paying ad. So it doesn't help you to have it there. So I'm not suggesting, blast your page with an ad after each paragraph. It's poor user experience, but it will also not get you the money. So it's not helpful. But play around, tweak those additional features, try them out, see what they do for your site, and then see if it works for you, leave it on. And I'm not a purist. I know some people they have the website and then they go, I don't like seeing ads on my site, this is poor user experience, and then they sort of shy away and they try to limit the number of ads just so that their site would look pretty. But I don't care if what my uncle or aunt would say when they see the site. I care about the revenue from the site. So I think people are used to seeing a lot. I'm used to that. I don't turn away from a website just because it has a lot of ads. And as long as the content is good, people stay on the site. So I would say, if you want to go high with the RPM, experiment, try all the features. Don't be afraid to do that. See what they do to your revenue and see how you want to tweak your sites, and create the space for that with video ads, with sidebars, with sticky ads wherever is possible, and then take it from there.
For your 25 sites and your portfolio, how much are you doing, we'll call them maybe custom things to it? I heard you mention stock photos. Are you producing your own unique images? I heard you mention video. Are you producing your own video for some of these sites? Custom graphics, like these little add-on things that maybe aren't necessary when you're first starting out, but maybe they become necessary, or you've maybe found that they add extra revenue to it. Are you doing that, or not worrying about it?
Not a lot. So video, I experiment with stuff just because I'm bored and I got ADHD. So I just like to try out new stuff. But video, no, we used to produce these really short videos, basically like, readers' favorites, just so we can have the ads on the video. But now with Mediavine, at least you don't have to do that. They have the universal video player, which is basically just, let's show them the ads and, forget about wrapping it up, wrapping a video around that. And I really appreciate that, because I think the videos were pretty low quality. They didn't add much to the site. If you want to show ads, let's just show the ads. So we no longer do that. And then we do try to we use stock photos. We don't take our own photos usually. If a writer or another team member, or even myself, we have the photos because we saw the product or whatever, did something with it, and we want to contribute, that's fine. We just uploaded the photos to the ClickUp task, and then the publication guys know to take those photos and work with them as well. That's fine. But I don't, we don't go out of our way to do that. If it happens, great. If not, let's just use stock photos. It doesn't matter that much. There's so many little things that people swear by and say, yeah, you need to have this and that, and lots of bells and whistles. And I think it's just really easy to get sidetracked and start dealing with stuff that just isn't as important as producing more content. So we try to avoid those things.
Some good advice. That's some sage advice. It's so easy to get distracted and barge down maybe a path that is not really required when you take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I have one kind of final topic to talk about because I want to respect your time. And that is around the topic of going back and updating previously published content. And I'll admit that I find it to be so laborious and time consuming and difficult to know what to do sometimes. We know content kind of decays as time goes on. We know that Google likes you to go back and update your content and republish it and add to it and that sort of thing. What do you guys do? I mean, 15,000 posts, you'd have to have an entire team dedicated to updating old content, I would imagine. Do you do that, or how do you approach it?
So this is like, it's a bit of a painful topic because I'm hearing so many people updating their content all the time and swearing by all kinds of methods. And we have tried them all. We have tried GSC. What we do is we have this machine that works on producing content, right? And then we try whenever I'm the one who's on Twitter forums, all of that, trying to pick up and see what other people are doing. And then when we hear something, I try to see if we can implement that strategy. But my husband, he's the scientific numbers guy, and he tells me, hey, we need to test this, but test it properly. By testing properly, I mean, he makes, we take like a group of 30 or 40 posts and then randomly divide them into a control group and the actual experiment group. It's very scientific, right? And then I don't see anyone else doing that. What people typically do is they just hopefully take a bunch of posts, work on them, and then come back and say, hey, this worked, the posts went up. And usually what you'll see, they say, yeah, it works some of the time, right? Because some of the posts went up, but with others, it didn't succeed. But hey, it worked for some of the posts, so I'll go on working. But what we found is that once you compare it to the control group, it doesn't work. So nothing happens. We don't get the additional traffic for us from updating content. And I would love for someone to show me the opposite, because there's something so tempting about being able to fix posts. And we've tried everything. I've tried posts that were on the second page of Google, posts that were on various number, top 10, top 5, top 3, went down, we're up. Like, I've tried all kinds of variations for updating content. Right. And whenever we compared it to a control group, yeah, sure, the site sometimes went up. It could be seasonality. It could be something with the Google algorithm. I don't know what it is. But the control group posts would go up by the same measure as the ones that we updated, no less. And it's an average game, right? I mean, not everything went up, neither in the control group nor in the one that we updated, but updating the post has not moved the needle one bit. So we just focus on creating more content. And I know so many people will listen and just be shocked and say, no, this is blasphemy. You have to keep on updating your content because everybody's doing that. Everybody's teaching that. And I don't know, maybe they're right. If someone out there has tried this properly like that and can show me that it works, I would love to know how, because we didn't, we couldn't make it happen.
Well, the comments on YouTube at least are open here. So maybe somebody will just drop a knowledge bomb that we've never heard before. I do love what you're saying. I love all of it, but I love one point I want to highlight is that the control group, because you're right. It's so easy to go and update some articles and then, hey, we'll come and check back in 3 months and they went up. That's success. But you have to compare that up against other articles because we know sites fluctuate as a whole just all the time. They're always going up and down. Seasonality, updates. You publish new content over the course of that 3 months, and all of a sudden Google sees you as topically relevant on a topic. And so all the posts in that silo go up. And there's so many variables. I love that content or the control group, sorry, and thinking about it from a standpoint of, well, yeah, they went up, but so did everything else on the site, or so did the other ones at the same amount and the same percentage. Very compelling at the least to think of, because it sure is a tough nut to crack in terms of figuring out and all that. So, hey, I said it was the last question. I just have to, if I'll get in trouble if I don't at least ask you at scale about link building. We don't have time to dive into a huge process. Okay, you're shaking your head, which means we're not going to have to have a 30-minute conversation.
I don't do it. There's
Done.
we don't do any link building. I mean,
$200,000 in revenue a month, no link building.
Right.
That might get more comments. For the record, that might get more comments from people than the content updating one.
because I mean, obviously we have incoming links because, links just get organically, people link to your sites because we are ranking high. So we get links. It's like this thing sort of feeds itself. But we do nothing to do this actively. We don't reach out. We don't use Hero. We don't, no guest posting? What is it that people do these days? No, just nothing.
It's so good. All right. This is great. Well, let me finish by asking you what are the goals for this portfolio? I mean, just from a high level, are you working towards a sale incrementally, like try to sell them off when they hit certain milestones and peel them back? Are you looking to hit 100 sites? Are you looking to try to sell them all as one big media conglomerate? I'm just curious what's the goal here?
So we have some personal circumstances because we moved from another country to the US. So there are all kinds of tax implications. And one thing I should say, we try to work with experts where possible. So that will be like a piece of advice I have for anyone who wants to scale. Get experts, get legal advice from experts, get accounting advice from experts. We hired a COO, and she's like a top level COO, and she sort of brought the whole company up like a whole new level with contracts, with procedures, with all of that. So our plans are like based on our circumstances in terms of all this moving from one country to another business. So what we will probably do is hold on to the established sites for as long as this works. It could be, I don't know. I want to say 5 years, just because 5 years in this business is like an infinity. I mean, who knows what will happen a year from now? But basically, long term. And then we are working on creating a part of the portfolio where we will sell some of the sites. I hope to start selling either by the end of this year or maybe early in 2023. And there will be like a kind of ongoing exit because, every site that you sell, you're basically selling a bunch of revenue generating posts that are getting, being moved out of the system. So they will no longer generate revenue, but then you're getting the multiples for potential revenue. So we want to do that. We will be selling sites, but we are not planning on an exit in the next few years. So
it's great. It sounds like a good strategy. And you're right. I mean, it's a good reminder for people who haven't heard it or have maybe, numbed a bit to it. Like when you sell a site, you have potentially broker fees. It's a common, common percentage that comes off the top. Tax implications, and that varies by person, by country, by state, by all these things. And that can take a lot off the top. And so you want to make sure that you're, really cognizant of kind of the numbers behind the deal before you just sell it. You never actually, kind of get that full amount unless you have some trick up your sleeve that no one knows. So, well, I'll wrap it up by saying it has been a real treat to have you on. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing so candidly.
Can I add just a small thing, Jared? It's just
please.
Sort of important. Okay. So there's one message that's really important for me to get out is for people to try things for themselves. I know that even an interview like this, people like hear the numbers and the figures, and it just makes you, people call it inspired. So yeah, inspired if you like, because if I managed to get from that to this, from this to that, like anyone could do it, etc. So first, I want people to remember that it's risky. I wouldn't have invested like loans or anything like that. We used our own money from the business, and we kept reinvesting it. And I'm at the age where we have our funds and our savings, and we can sort of rely on that. It is a risky business. It's not easy. It's challenging. And whatever you do, try things out for yourself. Just because for me link building doesn't work or content updating doesn't work doesn't mean that it won't work for someone else. By the same token, whoever you follow, it doesn't matter if they have a course, if you follow them on Twitter, on their blog, whatever, you know, I have it written like on my blog on yace.com. I have it written like your mileage may vary, because I think it's so important. People like keep looking for the silver bullet for something that will surely work because it worked for someone else. And it just doesn't work like that. So, you know, be careful, be mindful of that, try things out for yourself before you scale, and make sure that you know what you're doing. Because not everything works out. You can also fail in this.
I love you said it, because I was going to ask you to tie it all up and wrap a bow on it for us.
Oh,
That's
sorry.
perfect. No, you don't have to apologize. You clearly were reading my mail there. You knew exactly what I was going to ask, because there's so many big picture ideas that we kind of touched on, and we didn't really dive. You know, we could have dived deep and spent an hour just on exactly how you set up a content process that's operationally focused. We could have spent all of this time talking about RPM, you know, and how to really go deep into getting your RPMs as high as possible. We could have gone deep on the keyword research and the niche validation. So we stayed really high level, which I think deserved kind of tying it all back up. So I'm really glad you did that. Where can people kind of follow along on your journey? Where would you want to direct people to keep up with you?
So I think the best place would be my blog, and that's yace.com, YEYS.com. And I'm also on Twitter, but the blog is probably the best place to follow and get in touch. I get a lot of responses to posts. I don't blog that often. I wish I could. It's usually like on a good month, it will be twice a month. I do have a case study, an ongoing case study of 4 websites that I'm tracking in this year in 2022. So I just share the stats, and these are new sites. These are not established sites. We started them usually last year, the end of last year. So they're relatively new, and I just show, and I think that also goes back to what I just said. You can see that out of the 4 sites, not all of them are successful. So, and that's fine. I sort of put them out there before I knew if they would work or not. I just let people see transparently what really happens when it, and even if you have the experience, even if you have the intuition, even if you have the resources, it does not mean that your site will succeed. Some do better than others. So that's what you have on the blog, and people do respond and do leave comments, and I love that, and I always reply to comments. So that's a good place to reach out.
Well, good. We'll include a link below for people who want to jump over. Anne, thank you so much for coming on board. Congratulations on the success you and your husband and your entire company are achieving. I wish we'd waited maybe just one more month. We could have celebrated that $200,000 milestone.
Yeah.
It seems to be a trend. I keep interviewing people right before their milestone. I think I did it a month or 2 ago with someone else. So, but congratulations on your success. Thanks for coming on and sharing.
I'm glad you interviewed me then today. That means that next, it'll work.
I got an email literally 3 days after I did the interview saying, I got the number that I talked on the podcast about almost hitting. And I was like, I could have waited 3 days, man. But yeah, so hopefully 3 days for you and you'll be there. Okay. Thanks, Anne. Really appreciate it. We'll catch up again soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.